Hi, everybody, welcome. Tesla is down 2%. Overall markets. Dow Jones up 0.8%. Nasdaq down 0.7%. S&P 500 down 0.2%. The semiconductors are struggling today. Nvidia down 3.4%. Nvidia has been extremely volatile today. It opened up a couple percent up and now a few percent down. Nvidia is up in the last year. Nvidia tripled, and most of that came, almost all of that came in the last 6 months. Nvidia is going to be a topic probably very frequently because it is driving the entire stock market right now. It used to be Max 7, and then it became, a few companies, and today it's mostly Nvidia that's driving the entire market, or really accounting for most of the gains, and nobody else is really participating in the rise, which is incredible to me. Hey, Flexity, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We have YouTube Live also going on at the same time. YouTube Live has a live chat function. I encourage people to have a conversation on there, ask questions as well to others and to me. If there's anyone on both platforms and there's an issue on YouTube, please come up with us to speak here and let me know that there's an issue right away. Finflexity. Yesterday we were going to talk about something. In fact, it got cut off, I think. But what do you think about NVIDIA stock, generally speaking?
What were you asking? Nvidia?
Right.
I didn't get the last two words that you said. You got cut off after Nvidia.
Yeah. What do you think about NVIDIA stock?
Uh, I think that for the next 1 year, it is a good buy, but I doubt the long term potential after 3 years. They have enough demand to satisfy the user base for 3 years, but after that, I doubt if they get a reality check or not. Actually, we had another big news today. Car dealers across the US have been actually in their software has been down for two days consecutively. The company that actually owned the stock got hacked once, then they fixed the hack, and the next day today they got hacked again. So like approximately 15,000 dealerships can't operate on software today.
Yeah, I saw that. I guess they had to do work by hand for a day or two, but I don't think this is going to lead to. I mean, unless do you expect this to become a widespread issue for dealerships, more frequent? But every kind of industry, every business gets active these days. So I don't think the customers, the buyers care.
I mean, I think their dealer, I think the biggest impact for them is that maybe the company wasn't clear whether the situation would be solved today or not. So they were like, at least on Thursday, we won't be able to operate. Then we'll give you an update what will happen next. We'll see it tonight.
Are you all in Tesla stock, or do you own other stocks?
I usually own a lot of stocks. Tesla, I only own like 10 shares because, as a student, I don't have a lot of investment income. And owning US stocks is much more expensive compared to owning emerging markets for me.
Let's bring in Tesla Yoda and talk some Nvidia if he wants to. Tesla Yoda, how are you? Yoda, how are you?
Good. Sorry, just grabbing my coffee mug.
What do you got in mind?
I think the other space is talking about advertising, so I had to drop out of there. But yeah, excited about the fans, the only fans that Elon is installing.
Oh, I didn't realize. Is X introduced a new service?
Yeah, I think at the Gigafactory, the Giga Texas visit, a lot of us saw the site of the factory that they're putting up, and then now the fans are coming in. It's very interesting how they're using Dell, half Dell and half uh, Supermicro. And Supermicro is trying to push direct liquid cooling or DLCs. And so it'd be interesting to see if the fans are working in combination with liquid cooling technology as well. So,
Is there a stock that you would short today in the semiconductor industry?
no, I just bought more TSMC this morning.
Oh my
So
gosh, I
now,
thought you were.
yeah, yeah. So now I think, yeah, it's like I think the cumulative shares is 1977, I think, as of this morning. So just trying to really invest in the race course that is in this AI cycle right now.
Flexly.
Uh, am I wrong, or is Dell and Supermicro only partnering with XAI for their centers?
Yeah, I think Dell is basically doing the racks, but inside the Dell racks are NVIDIA. And then Supermicro uses NVIDIA as well within the XAI data centers. But I think both of them are uh, sort of agnostic. So they'll, depending on the clients, they'll use NVIDIA or they'll use AMD or Intel. Um, but I think in XAI's case, it's NVIDIA inside.
I think Dell announced that they will use their XC server on for the XAI data center. I don't know about Supermicro yet.
Yoda, so you were at the shareholder meeting. Did you join the factor tour with Elon and France, or
I took actually two tours because I was in research mode, so I did it sort of twice. And on my last tour, the second tour, I saw Elon in France, starting the special tour as I was ending mine. So no, I wasn't in that group, but I yeah, I saw them take the group through.
in your two tours, would you like to share any of your, observations, insights?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think, as a Tesla vehicle owner, you kind of see uh, the technology, the events, FSD in cars, and you experience that. But for me, the tour was about researching, the machine that builds the machine, which is a product in itself. And so the biggest takeaway for me is, it's easy for us on here to talk about, why don't they put in a second line? Why don't they do this and that? But when you're on the ground and you're seeing the the bolts that's actually uh, in the factories holding down these machineries, you understand that it's amazing what they've achieved in the time that they've achieved in building the factory. Now, in terms of the line that we toured the Cybertruck line, and this is the first time they allowed I think sort of folks to see the lines in action live, and so you're seeing again the people, the machinery building these cars. Now, what's quite amazing is you're seeing these autonomous skates sort of transferring the work in progress Cybertrucks around. You're seeing robotic arms hoisting these half finished bodies up and down. And it feels like these multi ton um, vehicles are essentially weightless. And as I posted, it feels like you're in a ballet, you're watching an orchestra performing the symphony. It's not a noisy, chaotic environment. Everything seems to be well in sync.
You've taken factory tours before, right? Is this any different from the previous ones you've taken?
Uh, I've toured other factories producing other things, but this is the first Tesla factory.
Okay, got you. Alexander, how are you?
Hello, guys. How are you?
Good.
Is it hard to get into a Tesla event in the US?
I think you have to be invited to this one, right? You have to kind of win a lottery. They kind of changed it around a little bit. Yoda?
Yeah, I think if you are a investor, on their website, there's a section where you can kind of demonstrate proof of that you're a shareholder. And once they've validated you, you can enter into draws for the event. And then, yeah, so for example, this was the shareholders meeting, but there's other product related events, and then it's a random draw depending on how many people enter. Obviously, the chances aren't very high. One thing I'm not sure is whether the share count matters. So if you have more shares, um, do you get more kind of ping pong balls in the lottery draw? Uh, Now, the other barrier they create is once you are SVP, it's not really confirmed. I believe, for security reasons and maybe logistic reasons, they confirm that they give you the QR code and they give you the final confirmation. In this most recent case, only a couple of days out. Yeah, just to create another kind of barrier.
Okay. Could you borrow someone's shares to get invited? I mean, I have shares of my own, but I mean, could you borrow someone's shares?
Do you mean
I don't think so.
like people can add you? Yeah, so that's the other way you could get invited is if you are a shareholder and someone who got invited could plus one you into the.
Ah, okay. I was thinking like if you have a couple of friends that have shares.
All right, thank you,
You,
Alexander. At the top of
yeah.
your screens is a post by Elon. He says sizing for 130 megawatts of power and cooling this year, but will increase to 500 megawatts over the next 18 months or so. Aiming for half Tesla AI hardware, half NVIDIA and other. Interesting. Play to win or don't play. So I guess, 130 megawatts of power and cooling this year, and then increase to 500, more than 500, it says, in the next 18 months. So that's about 4x next 18 months, let's say 2 years. What do you think about those numbers, Vita? Inflexity.
Yeah, I didn't see this post. I'm just calculating how many H100s would that be.
Yeah, either H100s or H200s, or I guess the next one coming is B100s. And he also says other. So I guess maybe they'll buy some AMD as well. Who knows?
I don't know if my math is correct on this, but given a 65 megawatt capacity of power, and like discounting for the amount you would require for cooling, so discounting 30% for cooling, you would end up with around over 60,000 H100 in the facility. And then there's Tesla and others as well.
Over how many thousand you said?
Around 60,000. If you take that, 30% of the power will be used for cooling. If you take that higher, then at least over 50,000 either way.
So this is in line with some of the other numbers that we've heard from Elon before. Like this is not necessarily new information, right?
Yeah, so I just searched it. So typically it's 40% for cooling. So that would essentially be 50,000 GPUs either way.
Thank you. Alexander, yesterday we had an exchange on X, and I said I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Would you like to elaborate on that conversation?
Specify, please.
Let me find it real quick. Inflexity, go ahead while I search for this.
Yeah, so I missed this news 2 days ago, but anyway, it is related to self-driving. So a company called Wabi, they are basically self-driving for trucking. They raised 200 million from Volvo, Uber, and Nvidia to develop their autonomous fleet of trucks. I think they run in California and Texas. I'm not sure. But anyways, they use a different approach of training their models. So what they do is that they don't use lidar or anything. They basically run synthetic. They basically run models on synthetic data. So they'll run simulations in 3D spaces of different cars around the trucks, and they'll try to use that data to make a model. So that's cost efficient for them. And I think they'll begin a pilot program in next year.
Okay, thank you. Omar, welcome. What do you think about Elon's tweet at the top? 130 megawatts of power and cooling this year, but will increase to more than 500 megawatts over the next 18 months or so, aiming for about half Tesla AI hardware and half NVIDIA/other.
Yeah, half a gigawatt. That's pretty crazy. I mean, the power consumption of these things is just next level.
Do you think this will be enough to get FSD to 6 nines?
I have no clue, but it seems like it's working to me. Most of the drives I'm doing are zero intervention, hands-free, parking spot to parking spot. So I think it's working. You got the bitter lesson. Methods that scale up with computation are ultimately the most effective by far because computation just keeps increasing. You keep getting more compute per dollar. It's been a constant for the last several decades. We keep figuring out how to squeeze more and more transistors onto a wafer, get better and better performance. So if you just sort of bet on these methods that don't work that well today, but that scale with compute, when you sort of extrapolate that out, it tends to get pretty crazy. So I think it'll work, or, there's probably some things that they're missing that they don't understand yet, more discoveries to be made. But I think they'll discover and make them along the way. I think the progress is looking pretty good. It does seem like they've got the most advanced self-driving system in the world right now, and it's starting to actually leapfrog Waymo in performance on every metric, in driving feel and comfort And soon I think they're going to actually pass them in miles per intervention as well.
Yoda.
Hey Omar, since you own the Cybertruck, which doesn't have FSD, and other vehicle that does, I thought you could maybe describe and share how sticky FSD is for someone like yourself, who obviously physically is capable of driving. Um, and yeah, maybe you could just describe what you're missing, or how you miss that FSD when you're driving the Cybertruck.
Well, I mean, I do miss having FSD, especially on long drives, but the Cybertruck's so fun to drive that I don't usually mind it. So, often if I'm doing a longer drive, I do have two Teslas, one with FSD and one without. So, if I'm taking a longer drive, like let's say I'm driving into the city of LA or driving down to San Jose from San Francisco or something, where it's like an hour of driving there and back, there and then another hour back, then I'm going to take the car with FSD. For shorter trips around, I take the Cybertruck more, but it's so fun to drive that I've been taking it even for road trips, especially just because the ride comfort, the larger tires, the air suspension, just the fact that it's a larger vehicle just makes for a really comfortable ride. And it does have traffic aware cruise control, so that's at least something. So obviously I'm really excited for the Cybertruck to get FSD. I mean, that's just going to be next level, but the thing is just so much fun to drive, and I think the steer by wire is so fun to experience and play with that it kind of takes the sting off not having FSD, right? If it was just a normal car, then it might be a little bit worse, but the fact that it's just so fun to drive and has so much incredible technology like the steer by wire just makes it a lot of fun, even though there's no FSD yet.
I see. This is really impressive because Omar is answering Yoda's question here, and then also having a conversation with Elon outside of space. um, so Omar said half Dojo, half Nvidia, and then Elon responded and said mostly hardware for some Dojo. That's interesting. And then said Dan Hardware 5, which has been renamed to AI 5 in the next half of the next year. Says AI 5 computer has 10x the capability of hardware 4, and Tesla makes the whole software stack. Omar, can you help me understand this real quick? So I thought this power and cooling was for the south end extension, but Tesla is going to use hardware 4 in an extension? Or what am I missing here?
So the deep learning process consists of a forward pass and a backward pass. So you take a model and you kind of initialize it with random weights, right? So you say, okay, here's kind of a model that could, solve this problem or do what I wanted to do. And I'm going to initialize it with random weights. And then I'm going to take a piece of data, like input data, like an image, and I'm going to inference it through the model. And then you inference it through the model and you find out what the result is, right? So that step one is inference, right? It's the same thing that the car is doing when it takes that model and it runs it. So they actually do the inference on Tesla chips. So the forward pass is actually happening. They have 20,000 hardware 4 computers that they're putting up there. So the weight on the model is executed, the forward pass is executed, and then they take the answer and they have the right answer, aka the label, right? In this case, the label is the human driving data. And they look at how much the answer that came out of the model differs from what the correct answer actually was. Then they do back propagation, or the backwards pass. And back propagation involves taking that answer and the difference to the real value, and then going back up and adjusting the weights of the model to optimize the loss function such that the output of the model more closely resembles what the actual output should be. And through that process executed trillions and trillions of times, you eventually slowly get a model that you can actually inference the data through, and the weights are arranged such that you get the correct answer, right? So the backwards pass is being done on NVIDIA. The forward pass is being done using Tesla's AI inference hardware that they put in the cars. As a matter of fact, the same hardware 4 that's going into the car, they've got a rack of 20,000 of those in the data center. So they have their dojo, training computer, obviously, but they're also using the AI inference computer in the training loop as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Inflexity.
Yeah, so this is actually AI news again. Just now, I think a few hours ago, Anthropic released their newest model. So it's Claude 3.5, I believe, and it is the cheaper version that is released as 3.5, and they are claiming that it is the best model on the market now. So basically beating GPT-4 and their previous models, which almost cost 5 times as much as this one.
Omar, any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure what he said.
Anthropic released their latest model and claimed this is the best model. Anyway, Alexander, so I
Yes.
looked back at our exchange from yesterday, and you say I'm both bull and bear when it comes to Optimus. And from what was said today, which was yesterday's discussion, I don't think people really understand how far away Optimus is from doing anything useful. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. From the videos we have been looking at that Tesla released, we can see Optimus doing really simple things, picking up objects that are fixed from a fixed position and then putting it down on a fixed position. This is mainly what today's automation is doing. This has been existing for 25, 30 years. If you look at Figure AI, I think it's called, that robot, that does more complex things, like the parts it's picking up, it's not fixed. So that's telling me that they haven't come that far. I mean, you can compare it to FSD, that argue that, oh, they're doing FSD and now they can do Optimus, but that's not the same thing at all, I don't think, because the car doesn't need to know how soft an object is. It doesn't have to recognize and all objects that it doesn't even pick up stuff. It just drives. So it's not the same thing, I don't think.
And what experience do you have in the field?
Well, I work with automation and production. So I could go down to my workplace and do what Optimus does in the videos in 5 minutes, pretty much.
Can you elaborate on what type of automation you do?
Well, mainly I program CNC machines for the company I work for sells CNC machines. So I'm an applications engineer for those machines. But we also do automation. So we sell automation as like a turnkey project to Swedish companies, automotive, medtech. Yeah.
Inflexity.
Yeah, so to this, I would just like to say that robots have obviously existed for 25 years, but every robot till now has depended on a set timeline for when the product arises. So you would have to program that the machine runs at this rate and the robot will pick at this rate. So if you have an interruption, the robot will basically malfunction at that point. So that's very different with AI, obviously. And Optimus is using AI. And with AI, the And the main thing, right, is that we talked about this earlier as well, that a lot of human jobs we do are basic tasks, picking up stuff, warehouse workers. There are over 3 million warehouse workers in the United States alone. They are just picking up boxes, they are putting them down. So these are basic tasks, and Optimus will be able to accomplish them quite soon. And to the other point, that there is a big overlap between FSD and Optimus, because the recognition models that go into Optimus are the same as that go into FSD. So they are both based on voxels. Now, what you would develop for Optimus is an action model which would take in the data from the cameras, and then it would program what it has to do in real time. That's the only difference in them.
Sierra, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Happy Thursday. I'm sorry, that was no value add. I don't have a question yet.
What do you think about what Alexander said?
Oh, I was throwing parts up just because I'm always interested in CNC stuff. I have a machine shop and a couple of CNC mills and a CNC CO2 laser. So if he works in CNC automation, that's pretty cool. Our machines are not automated yet. That's all.
Alexander?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I believe there's a use case for Optimus, and I think like production will be the first low-hanging fruit that they can solve. But that's far away from making you a sandwich or anything like that. That's a total different game.
Omar, what do you think about what Alexander is saying?
I think it's already doing useful tasks. They're using it in the factory. And yeah, you could say, well, I could do that with, a KUKA robot or something. But I think a lot of people sort of miss what Optimus really is, right? They say, well, we've seen robots before. Tesla, you didn't invent robots. Yeah, we know they didn't invent robots. Oh, Boston Dynamics, they got a robot that can flip over. Okay, sure, they got a robot that can flip over. This is really about the software that powers the robot. We've had robots for decades and they've flopped. There's really been no reason to mass produce them and get the cost down. Why? Because the software has sucked. So if you can really train a general purpose model that can handle many tasks, yes, a KUKA robot can do this, but it needs to be specifically programmed, tuned in for that exact spot. You can't just move it. It's very brittle, right? If you've got one machine that can go operate this thing, but then also go over there and do that, and then go over here and talk to somebody. And if the software can actually make that leap, that is really the value add that Tesla's bringing here. They looked at their AI hardware that they're building. Elon's here talking about AI 5, which is going to be 10 times more powerful than AI 4 in terms of inference compute. They're building out a massive amount of training compute, the likes of which nobody in the robotics field has ever seen. Okay. When did somebody build a cluster of 100,000 GPUs to train a robot? Never. Okay. So, there's always naysayers. Everything, and anytime they do anything, people go, this is a bad idea. GM already tried EVs and it's going to be a long time before anybody ever, uses an EV full time. And you know what? Maybe it was a long time. It was a long time from 2003 to 2018 when finally you saw them start making mass market electric cars. But that's the thing about them. They think long term. In a world where everybody's thinking about quarters and weeks and days and today's price action, they think in years and decades. And that's why they consistently generate strong returns long term, I think.
Alexander?
Yeah, Omar, please show me one impressive thing that Optimus has done.
every single thing that it's done is impressive. Walking, moving things, every video I've seen. I mean, you look at the hardware on this thing, it looks more sophisticated than really anything you've seen as a mass market product before. The price that they're shooting for, $10,000 COGS, $20,000 ASP with an hourly rental model. I mean, this is a completely disruptive pricing model. The Boston Dynamics Spot, which is probably the closest analog to like a humanoid product you can buy, is like $75,000. So just by virtue of mass producing this and driving the cost down, making it available, allowing people to continue to extend it with software updates, it's a revolutionary product. It's like the first personal computer that came out, right? And yeah, it's not necessarily going to be ready to be in your house tomorrow or even next year, but you just look at how fast AI is evolving, and it's pretty clear, I think, that a general purpose model that can live alongside you, work in a factory, it's it's happening very fast. I mean, you look at what is happening with these language models, many of the very same technologies apply to robots, kind of just copy paste almost. Even like some of these major LLMs can sort of output robot commands. Combining mass produced robot hardware, where Tesla drives the cost down, as they've learned to do with their vehicles, with cutting edge AI software trained on a massive GPU cluster of a size we've never seen for in robotics. I mean, that is an exciting formula. I don't know if necessarily when they're going to be successful or when they're going to be able to turn a profit, but I think anybody who understands the technology and understands Tesla and Musk's ambition looks at this and they're very excited about the prospect of a robot that you could actually buy that could do whatever you wanted.
Sierra.
Yeah, I'd like to also respond to Alexander on what the most impressive thing I've seen demoed is. But let me preface that with talking a little bit about Optimus's vision capabilities tied to its neural net. So Optimus's real world understanding and ability to visualize and process the world around it is unparalleled. If we look at like the figure one most recent demo, with their partnership with OpenAI, it was all every action that that bot carried out was language prompted. It made no decisions of its own accord. It had to be prompted to do everything that it did. Whereas not the last Optimus demo, because the last video we saw was just it walking around and gaining speed with its motor function, but the one before that, where you may not have noticed if you weren't paying close attention, but when it was sorting the green and the blue cubes into green and blue bins, first of all, it was not prompted to do so. It was just put in front of a green and blue bin with green and blue cubes, and it was able to, through visual data, infer that the task it was meant to carry out was to sort them. But beyond that, at one point, it knocked over one of the cubes, and it actually self-corrected, stopped what it was doing, and picked it up, and then continued on. And this is before any integration with any LLM. It is pure visual understanding. And I think that gives it a tremendous leg up over anything else that we've seen on the market or even being worked on. We know that Tesla's vision technology that drives our cars is unparalleled, and that is going to be in a humanoid bot with the same ability to process the world around it.
Alexander.
Yeah,
Hold on, just 1 second. We
Okay.
have two Alexanders right now. Okay, so I'm going to refer to you as Chris Tenson. And the other Alexander must stay on mute and raise his hand and wait for me to call on him like everybody else. Chris Tenson, go ahead.
Yeah, we sell robots with a vision system that you just put parts on a conveyor belt and camera looks at the part and picks it up. Yeah, so you don't have to fix it. in a certain spot.
Sierra, what do you say to Alexander Christensen's point that his robots can do pretty much what Optimus can do today with vision also?
I would ask, did you train it to do that with data specific to the parts, and could it carry out a similar task without all of that training?
It's a standard solution. It's just plug and play.
So is this a robot that you've built yourself or that you've bought from some supplier?
It's a supplier. It's a Swedish company that makes it. ABV.
Okay, so is this like a robotic arm or a humanoid robot or?
It's a robotic arm. It's like 2 conveyor belts. You put on the top conveyor belt, you put the part you want in the machine, and it drives the part into the robot. It picks it up and then put the finished part on the lower conveyor belt. And it's just the camera that sees how the part is orientated, and it just picks it up. Plug and play, easy.
Well, a robotic arm that uses computer vision as part of its process, sure. There's stuff out there. But has anyone ever trained a foundation model like FSD is trained on human driving to be able to navigate the world? Trained a humanoid robot on data to allow it to navigate the world in a generalized way? They haven't. So obviously, it's not accurate to say computer vision has never been used in robots before, but nobody's ever built a cluster of hundreds of thousands of GPUs and trained a state of the art foundation model that can run on the device and power this robot. That's the real difference. I mean, when we're really looking at the AI hardware 4 and the AI hardware 5, I think there's very few robots that have ever even had this type of inference compute before and been able to run these fairly large or relatively large models locally with pretty good performance. So I think the combination of all those things, their AI inference hardware, their mass manufacturing capability, as well as their software strength, is going to create a pretty compelling product that is going to be hard for others to compete with.
Let's go to Alexander Adrianov.
Yes, Omar, I think that's exactly what people are missing is the software is already there. If you take any of the leading models, it has full understanding of the visual data. So you give it a picture of a room and ask which objects are soft, which objects are made of, what kind of material, and it will give you exact description of everything. The software is already there. It just needs a body. That's basically what does not exist right now, is they need to build it from scratch. Every single thing, every actuator, every muscle, every joint, they have to build it from scratch because you can't just buy off the shelf parts and build a humanoid robot. And that's going to take time. I'd say probably 2 or 3 years. But the software is actually, I don't see software as a limiting factor. I think it's just purely mechanical engineering at this point.
Lauren.
Yeah, I would be curious. This gentleman's experience, the example he gave was great of a simple arm with off-the-shelf software that can, pick from one conveyor, puts a part in a process, and then place it on a second conveyor. I'd be curious from his experience what the cost of a solution like that is, like to buy it and set it up initially, and then also maintain it and keep it going, and like how that would compare if you could buy say a $20,000 Optimus robot. How would it compare? They could potentially do the same job. How would those costs compare?
Christensen.
Yeah, well, those solutions is around $100,000. And I've said before, if Tesla can solve this, pick up parts and put it in the machine accurate, I think they have a good solution. But I haven't seen that. So, yeah.
Malik.
Hi, thanks. I feel like at some level, Alexander has kind of trivialized what Tesla has achieved and the rate at which they have achieved this. I know people working in the industry, and to get a robot to walk consistently with a whole body controller or whatever they might be using at this point is not easy. And they have gone through like in a period of 18 months, just ego localization, knowing where they are, understanding the local environment and where the objects are, which they've taken directly from what the car does, using the video feeds and and all of that, like just extracting information from the environment, knowing where they are, localizing objects, and then using the whole body controller, including the arm controller, to find where the object is, pick it up to a new location, and then self-correcting that. Maybe it's pre-programmed at the time for the moment, and they'll probably incorporate LLMs. But I think it just to say that this is just a pick and place task and it's and an industrial robotic arm can do this, which is fixed in a location, knows exactly where it is at all points, at its origin, and where the end effector is at all times. I think the complexity is a little bit more when you think about a robot like a humanoid robot, and from as to what they bring from the Tesla system, there's a lot. Like just state estimation itself is just a big deal. And then on top of that, what I get excited about is the fact that Tesla has figured out how to incorporate the video feed, the user input that they get from the car, and figure out what a task or what action needs to be done. That action mapping, they have a process or a pipeline for it. Now, it's not going to be exactly the same way for a humanoid robot, but that is going to give them a pretty big leg up. And it's very exciting to see all the humans in their local lab in the videos where they were doing pick and place manipulation tasks, which was also including deformable objects like a clothing thing and then picking stuff from a cluttered bin. So they're working on all of those tasks right now. And within a year, I would imagine that they would have made significant progress in these things. So, yes, maybe today they can't do what an industrial robot can do with that much consistency. But I think we should not like underestimate the fact that this field is moving forward, and they do have a strategy and a pipeline as to which they know works for their autonomous cars, which they need to now like massage into a human robot system.
Thank you, Malik. Alexander Christensen, do you have a response to that?
Not really. I've shared a video in the response of the robot I spoke of, if anyone is interested.
Okay, thank you. Alexander, let me ask you, so your original point was, which it sounds like you're sticking with it, people don't realize how far away Optimus is from doing anything useful. And Elon said on stage at the shareholder meeting that by next year, Tesla will have 1,000 or maybe more Optimus doing useful tasks at the factory. Do you think Elon's being optimistic on the timeline? And if so, how far away do you think that is? 1,000, maybe a couple thousand Optimus doing useful tasks at a Tesla factory.
Yeah, sure. To your point that Elon spoke of it, like he said several years ago that we're going to earn money with our cars and the car is going to pay for itself. So I take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's fully possible. You could have a robot just pick up a box and put it on our place, and that would be useful, I guess. But it's not making you a sandwich or mowing your lawn on or whatever.
How many years do you think from making me a sandwich?
It depends. I am not that good at.
Sorry, I mistakenly muted everybody. Can you just unmute yourself and continue?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's hard to say. Things can move fast. So I guess maybe 10 years, but it's not 2 years.
10 years from making me a sandwich. I'm going to go starving. That's not cool. Omar, do you agree with that timeline? 10 years for a sandwich? That sandwich better be amazing.
I believe Optimus could be trained to make a sandwich today.
Oh. Alexander, Omar says, I'm not going to go starving. That's a big
Okay.
difference.
Sandwich was quite a bad example. I agree, but I mean more complex things.
I mean, have you checked out the Stanford Robotics? What they've demonstrated with N10 learning? They've shown a robot that can cook already.
Yeah, as I said, cooking is maybe a bad example, but I mean the one that you can buy for 20K, I think that's far away.
Inflexity.
Yeah, so I would just like to say that the robot that Alexander was talking about from the company, the Swedish company, I have looked at it before, and it is definitely not autonomous at any level. It is hard coded in a robotic studio, which is based on CAD, and you actually have to program it with your manufacturing line to integrate it seamlessly. Otherwise, it won't work in a manufacturing line. So you need to plan the whole line according to how you want the robot to work, and only then. So it is a very lengthy process. By my estimation, I think it was a year back that I was ordering a robot for a company that I was working for. It took approximately 3 months to get the whole line ready with around 5 or 6 robotic arms, and it would require a new conveyor belt from previous manufacturing facilities.
Sierra.
I was just going to add on to Omar's comment about Stanford's robot, which is the Mobile Aloha, and is currently open source and already priced at around $30,000. But you would have to source your own build, but you can do so for around $30,000, and they're anticipating to bring that down. And you can also train that to do tasks not in the same way, not with purely visual data, but just to add some color there on pricing, that we're already getting lower in price points.
Alexander, Sierra says that I can already get a robot for $30,000 that can make me a sandwich.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you a Tesla stock investor?
Yes, since 2017.
Okay. Are you all in, mostly in, or do you have a diversified portfolio?
I'm mostly in, so I'm a bull, but not on all parts.
Say that last part, but not what?
But not on all things that Elon says. I'm not a bull at, but yeah, FSD. I like that, and I like the cars. But
Oh, okay.
options,
Okay.
not so
So
much.
you subscribe to the ARK Invest view that robotaxis are going to drive the next leg up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get to Travis and then Inflexity.
Hey, all. Yeah, you may have covered this. I apologize, but on the sandwich comment, I think one of the things that Elon's talked about is he sort of believes that legislation, all the legal constraints, are sort of like the Lilliputian strings holding down Gulliver. And I think, from my perspective, he's been battling with FSD has huge legal constraints. Neuralink has huge legal constraints. SpaceX, as we know, has huge legal constraints. And I think Optimus in the privacy of your own home is going to have no legal or policy constraints. So this might be the first time that Elon can really flex his muscle and go fast and sort of break things. So with regard to the sandwich, I think the robots Optimus is going to be out in 2026 with a lot of beta testers. And with that many beta testers and the software updates, I think it'll be doing sandwiches in 2027.
$2027. Okay. Which is in 2027. Travis, first of all, do you have experience in the field?
None in robots. I'm a video game executive, so lots around video game development, software updates, and generative AI in video games, but nothing with robots.
Do you develop games for specific hardware? Are you close? Do you work with NVIDIA at all or other companies?
We're pretty standard stuff. So mostly mobile, iOS, Android, using a pretty big open source engine. And then we use a lot of off-the-shelf APIs for connecting with 11 Labs and, ChatGPT and the like.
Great, thank you. Synflexity.
Yeah, so this point is actually, just related to robotics as a whole. So Aloha, just this year only, they released a demo of it making a Michelin star meal, and like Sierra said, it costs around $30,000 to make yourself, probably lower in smaller economies. And just to my point, I remember this around 2017 or 18. I had visited Singapore, and during my stay there, we actually had a robot in the hotel which was already making an omelette and assembling the whole omelette with whatever toppings you asked it for. Uh, it was a button system, but even in 2017 and 18, we had robots making food for people in hotels in Singapore. I don't know about elsewhere.
I love this discussion because there's a wide range of views, a wide range of timelines, lots of things that we can actually specify more. So, for example, Farmer George says in the replies to YouTube live chat, he says, "What kind of sandwiches are we talking about? Simple ones like ham and cheese and PB and J, or ones that require cooking like chicken parm?" Alexander, are you talking about PB&J? I actually don't really, I'm not a huge PB&J kind of guy, but I would rather have a chicken parm sandwich.
I regret the sandwich.
No, it's okay. Sandwich is great. Sandwiches are great. I am hungry actually right now, so maybe not the best time to talk about sandwiches, but so did you change your view at all since we started talking about this, or do you still think it's going to be beyond 2030?
Yeah, but I mean, like, I understand Omar's point about the training and everything. It can go really fast. I mean, but I don't know. We have to see. Time will tell.
It sounds like you have a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth from missed timelines on FSD. And do you think that's impacting your forecast for Optimus timelines?
That might be true, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Malik, how are you? I think this is your second or third time coming up, right?
Yeah, second or third. I'm good. I'm good. How are you? I tried actually connecting in last time, but some technical issue happened. But I'm good.
Okay, good. And last, if I remember correctly, you were just graduating, right? And you're looking for jobs?
Yeah, still am. Still in the process. My defense is scheduled for next month.
Next month. Wow, that's cool. Good luck to you. What do you have to do
Thanks.
to prepare?
Just get my committee on board. We'll finish up my document, my dissertation document, send it about 2 weeks before the scheduled event, and make a presentation, and then yeah, just give the presentation, and hopefully everything goes well.
Can we be a fly on the wall during your presentation if you just put us on? As a
Yeah,
live
most likely
dissertation?
I will probably have a Zoom link, so I will try and put it somewhere when that's scheduled. So yeah, sure.
Is there a paper we can read?
Yeah, the dissertation will be openly available from Penn State's like dissertation and thesis website. So at the moment, I don't have it published, like isn't in the sense like I've not uploaded on ArchiveX, but I have other papers that are available on ArchiveX and through my Google Scholar and stuff.
Okay, well, send me a link and just tag me on the link, and I'll look at your papers first.
Will do.
Very good stuff. Yeah, very good. All right. Sierra, what else is on your mind?
I just kind of spammed the purple pill a little with some existing robots that can cook, like fully cook using flame and stove and all sorts of different prepared meals, which is, they are specialty built bots, more like robotic arms. But I also put some stuff on Mobile Aloha down there and all the tests that it can do. And lastly, figure one, which is testing different types of neural network training. And they were able to get their bot to learn how to make coffee by observing humans do it for 10 hours. So I would say that Optimus could make you a sandwich by tomorrow if there was intention to show Optimus how to make a sandwich.
Thank you, Sierra. Sierra, can you do me a favor? Oh no, you don't. You don't have an iPhone, do you? Yeah.
I don't. Is my audio terrible?
Well, there's a lot of background noise, and iPhone does voice isolation on the mic mode, but that's all right. Flexity.
Yeah, just a tip for Sierra, you can actually configure your mic if you have Samsung as well, just like iPhone. Anyways, I was just saying that within the food industry, so like if you were going to make a robot which was programmed to make food or something, the biggest advantage that you would have is that there is such a treasure trove of data on YouTube, on Instagram. You have everything from POV to third person to basically any view that you can imagine. You have hundreds of thousands of people actively making dishes every day and and the data is just insane on that front.
All right. We're going to focus a lot on Optimus going forward, not because, as Grant would say, automotive business is faltering, but because Optimus is indeed the majority of the intrinsic value, assuming that it works and Tesla can scale it. And Omar and Machine had estimated 70% probability of Tesla being able to do that in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm getting a lot of questions about Palantir. I don't know if I'm ready to change topics just yet, but Omar, what do you think about the fact that NVIDIA is driving the entire stock market these days? It used to be Mac 7 and then a few companies, and now it's just NVIDIA alone.
Yeah, now it's the Magnificent One.
It is. Are you
I mean,
selling or buying more?
I'm holding. I mean, you definitely see a little bit of bubble psychology at play. I'm not saying there isn't fundamental expansion driving this rally, but you see the typical signs of market psychology where, people just make boatloads of money and the stock split is happening. People are kind of pouring in, your grandma's pouring in, your, your weird uncle is now calling you and asking you about it, right? So, I don't know really how long this rally continues. Are they going to go to 200 or something? I don't know. It could get pretty nutty. But yeah, at some point, reality will probably hit that this isn't just some type of, magical continuous expansion forever. And that, it's not all beautiful. It is kind of a bubble and bust type of market, especially as everybody else is trying so hard to go after them. They've got these juicy 76% margins, but who knows? Are we at the end of the run? Are we at the beginning of the run? We'll have to see. It ultimately depends on a lot of factors.
You're the one that probably knows more than we do. So what do you think? Are we in the first inning, as Dan Ives says, or is this kind of late stage? Are we towards the end of the game?
Well, are people going to stop buying their systems? I don't think so. I think people are actually going to be buying a lot more. We've only begun to see the deployment of these AI enabled features. So at some point it starts cooling down. Definitely doesn't seem like that day's today. Is it a year from now? Is it 6 months from now? Is it 2 years from now that sales growth starts slowing? I don't know. Eventually you kind of run into the law of large numbers where, you can't really grow much because you've just gotten so large. But today it still seems kind of like we may not have hit the peak yet in terms of demand for their GPUs.
Well, I mean, the demand for GPUs can increase and their sales can increase, but if the sales growth rate slows down substantially, then that's a problem, right?
You know, Elon just replied to a tweet from someone, probably a listener of this space, who said, for every additional 9, you need 10x the compute. And Elon said, well, it's not that much, but it's a lot, right? So, in order to solve self-driving and Optimus and unlock trillions of dollars of value, we need a ton of compute. And right now, there's no company on earth that is better at providing that for AI training than NVIDIA. They're so good that even Tesla's own Dojo system is taking a back seat compared to this because it's so good. So, really, this entire business that we're talking about here, Tesla, and them achieving the goals that they want to achieve, maybe, right? There's some execution risk there. Really depends on them buying billions of dollars of compute from NVIDIA. And, you know, Tesla and the forward thinking businesses are realizing it now. In the future, you may have sovereigns, smaller companies, other companies also using or buying these systems as well for their own use cases. So, I mean, the impact of deep learning is just huge. Like, our appetite for trading models only seems to be increasing. Am I going to sit here today and say, well, yeah, that was a huge run up, but this is it? Nobody's going to want to train AI models anymore, bigger or better models. I mean, Ilya's starting another company. Now he has to go buy a GPU cluster, right? VCs are just throwing so much money at this. I think this is really the first phase of a 4-phase AI trade.
I see Elon's tweets about not needing 10x to compute for each 9. If anybody in the audience or on the speaker board can specifically walk us through why that is. Why don't you need 10x? Why is it going to be less than 10x need for training compute for each additional 9? I would really appreciate that. I think that is very critical. That's very critical. I don't think anyone knows. So if you know, come up to speaker board. Machine.
Well, I mean, I guess on that topic, I don't think anyone was saying specifically that the relationship between the change in error rate and the change in compute that slope. We know exactly what that slope is. I think people were talking that scaling laws that slope would be linear or predictable once you started measuring it. And so he's saying, no, it's not. You don't need to increase compute 10x to get that drop of. I didn't see the tweet. I'm just listening to what you're saying. To reduce error rate by 10x.
Yeah,
I don't know what he said.
Yeah, I'll pin it at the top. He says, so somebody said, every .9 will approximately 10x the required compute. Every 9, man, that is poor wording. For each 9, basically, he's saying you need 10x to training compute. And he said, yeah, and then Elon replied, I said, not as high as that, but still very high. The march of 9s of reliability requires massive data and compute. And what I'm saying is that if somebody can specifically walk us, whether it's from somebody from Tesla, and they don't have to do it in here, but I think this is a very key missing piece. Like, why is it less than 10x? Because there are people who think it's more than 10x. Machine?
Why do you think it's 10x to begin with? I don't even know. This accuracy, this 99.9 march of 9s anyways, is not the metric we would use. I would use something more like miles per intervention, which they also use.
So the reason why, I don't know how to word this, but the reason why I think it might be more than 10x is because of what I heard, that to have error rates, to have the error rate of an AI model you need 10x the training compute power or time. Okay, so each additional line is, I think, 2 or 3 halvings. So it might be orders of magnitude more training compute according to that rule of thumb. That is just a rule of thumb. It's a very general statement, rule of thumb. So in the case of Tesla developing FSD or Optimus software, it would be helpful if somebody could explain why you need less than 10x training computes to get to each node.
There's no global concrete law on the relationship between how long you compute a model and the reduction in error rate. Everything is domain and model specific. First of all, this is only a thing in mostly in deep learning. So I mean, someone else could probably better explain, especially from Tesla or who does deep learning computer vision models, on why that error rate, the reduction slope is what it is. I don't know, but it's not surprising that it's not necessarily 10x. And you also have to be careful about the parameter or the metric, which you were saying you're trying to back calculate how that goes back to error rate reduction. But so yeah, those are just my thoughts. I don't think it fundamentally necessarily changes much yet. So he's even noting that it's still very high. So maybe with scaling laws, we know that it's not just about compute. If you want to optimize reducing error rate, you're going to increase compute along with data and model size, and those are some other parameters there. So I don't know if this means it's super bullish or not. We'll see. I'd have to think about some, but someone else probably knows more.
Malik.
Yeah, additionally, there have been some recent papers come out that have shown that just the quality of data, improving the quality of data, this is in the LLM context, but improving the quality of data itself, you can improve the performance of the models without increasing the number of parameters or the amount of data. So with less tokens, with more quality, you can achieve improvement. So if Tesla is able to collect better quality data and then use something like Dojo to synthetically generate more scenarios, which then can be used along with their existing data set, that should itself start improving. Now, I don't know the 0.9, like the order of magnitude improvement where the 10x came from. I'm assuming it's going to be with more data collected, they would need more compute to begin with. Like that's natural, but that relationship, like Machine was saying, is not established. So it's kind of hard to say, I would say, at this point. But yes, like someone else with more knowledge and more experience in this.
I mean, like I understand that there are other parameters that you can tweak, like the quality of data or the model size, etc. I get that. But what I'm asking for is that specifically which parameters will be tweaked so that you don't need 10x training compute. And I mean, obviously they don't have to share that information. It might be competitive information. I don't know, but that's what the investors would want to see, I think. Machine.
Yeah, but again, I don't know where this 10x came from to begin with. I don't know where this assumption that 10x the compute time and you get a not 0.9 or whatever reduction in error rate.
No, having
Are
you not listening? Are you not listening? If you're not able to listen, I'm going to move on to other speakers.
Having a error rate does you need to have error rate 3 times, you said?
Omar?
So I think really when we talk about, the accuracy each 9, so for example, there's like a traffic light prediction task, for example, you could say, okay, how often does it get the traffic light correct? And it needs to be, 99.9999999. And the end-to-end model has to use that combined with other cues, like how the other cars are moving, to make the right decision and, have a very low number of miles per intervention. So this isn't like gospel in deep learning, something like, oh, okay, you need to, 10x the compute to get this much reduction in error. As a matter of fact, you could 10x the compute and not get, a reduction in the error. It's not necessarily guaranteed. You really need to scale up both the data and the compute together, right? So scale up both the data and the compute. So why do people say that you need a lot more compute for each 9? So we kind of have to think about, what does each 9 mean? Each 9 is a new order of complexity. To get the first 9, all you have to do is really like learn how to read lane lines and stay in them, right? You could probably get to like, 90% of miles without an intervention if you're just driving straight or something like that. Then, to get into the second 9, you have to do more complex things. Now, maybe you have to start handling, traffic lights and stop signs. Then, to get into the next 9, maybe now you have to start handling turns. Maybe you have to start handling, pedestrians. Then as you get deeper and deeper into the 9s, you have to start handling, hand signals. And you need to actually start understanding speech in some cases to understand what people are saying. You need to start doing more and more complex and more rare things. And handling these more and more rare things requires a lot of data to find those sort of rare events you need to train it on. And it needs a lot more compute because you're processing a larger amount of data, showing it a number of very long tail edge cases, and trying to, in the same amount of time, train a model that gives you better performance. So the sort of rule of thumb that we're talking about here just refers to the increasing complexity of each 9. Each 9 requires more and more intelligence to achieve, kind of.
Inflexity.
Yeah, so I had read a few research papers on similar topics. So first of all, I'll just preface this by saying that particularly for L5 autonomy or L4 autonomy, this research has never been done before. How much scaling you need for compute to get how much performance. So first of all, that's never been done before. But last year we did have a research paper. I think it was from some students in China. So what they basically showed was that that they created a vision model. I don't know how capable it was, but they created a vision model which was which gave competitive results to models that were twice its size, and they trained it on half the compute that those models were trained on. So they kind of established a relationship that you don't necessarily need to scale your compute to get better results. That's not true. So they established that. And to speaking to the point of how much compute you need to increase. So this is a concept of broken neural scaling laws. So you would have to apply that to this particular situation of autonomy, and only then will you be able to come up with how much scaling and compute would lead to how much more accuracy in the models, and that has never been done before.
Yeah, I think everyone here understands. We're talking, and these are uncharted waters. We all get that. Full 2035.
Yeah, I think the variable that we're not mentioning is time. Having this compute power allows things to be done quicker, not necessarily better. If we had unlimited time, we could achieve the same thing, I would think. Maybe Machine or Omar can correct me.
Machine.
All right. Well, this is debatable, of course, because again, it's uncharted waters in a sense. And I've argued with Meta because Meta is one of these absolutists who thinks, and he's not here, it's unfair, who thinks you just increase compute forever and the model's going to go to zero error rate for a given model size. And I think that's absurd. If you just think logically, if you have a very small model, you increase how long you compute, the error rate will go down to a certain point, and then it will asymptote because the model size simply isn't large enough to understand everything, and you have a limit there. And so the question is, with these very large models, when do you actually hit that limit where these linear scaling laws actually start asymptoting no matter what? You increase compute time without increasing data or number of parameters, that at some point it's going to be able to learn as much as it can from that model size. Will it hit a certain point? And the question is, maybe never. Maybe it is true that the models are already so big that for the task at hand, they have enough parameters to describe everything if sufficiently trained. But I don't know if that's the case. This is such a complicated problem. Do we really think that the models that Tesla has are already large enough to explain every case to get 100,000 miles per critical disengagement, I'm just conservatively assume that's not true.
Okay. So another factor that's improving obviously is going from hardware 3 to hardware 4 to hardware 5 on the inference side of the car. Omar, question for you. The fact that hardware 4 or hardware 5 can handle, let's see, I think it's 10x better than hardware 4. Does that mean you can put a 10x larger AI model on the car?
Well, when he says it's going to have 10 times the capability, I assume that means 10 times the inference tops. So the model side is going to be dictated by other factors, including memory and other details about the chip. But there's no doubt it's going to be able to run a significantly bigger model than hardware 4 or hardware 3. And so you would expect it to be more capable as well. But, I see a lot of commentary. I think it's funny how the community sometimes just takes any news and wants to interpret it in the worst way possible. And I see a lot of comments just saying, oh, so hardware 3 isn't good enough. It's a failure. Hardware 4 isn't good enough. This hardware 5 chip isn't coming for another 18 months. Okay. So it's going to be years before we even see this in a car. Them planning to make a new chip that's better doesn't mean the old chip, which was the best they could make at the time, isn't good. And I'll remind everyone that the models we're running today are entirely hardware 3 models. They're trained entirely on hardware 3 images. They're sized to run on hardware 3, and the hardware 4 cars run them in emulation mode. So we haven't even started using the additional processing power and training hardware 4 specific models. Everything we've seen so far has all been hardware 3. And hardware 3 is going to continue to improve. Elon said at the annual meeting, we haven't even touched the full capability of hardware 3 yet. Actually, going end to end has freed up a lot of compute that they can now use for the end to end model. So I think hardware 3 is just doing phenomenal. Like you see the pin video, parking spot to parking spot, 4 times in a row with no interventions, hands free. That's a hardware 3 car. So I think hardware 3 has done incredibly well. I think hardware 4 is going to be even better than hardware 3, which I can't even imagine right now. And then AI 5, which is going to come in 18 months, will obviously be better than hardware 4. But just because they're making new generations of chips doesn't mean the old chip is a failure or you don't need to buy a car or something like that. All the chips, hardware 3, hardware 4, hardware 5, they're all going to run FSD. They're all going to continue to improve. And him talking about a chip that's coming 18 months from now doesn't suddenly mean your hardware 3 car has something wrong with it.
Machine?
Omar's just coming out of nowhere to talk about a new topic to get defensive because I destroyed his argument yesterday. That's fine. I just want to comment because I missed this part about overall compute needs. When in the world have we had enough compute and decreased our needs for compute? Never.
Machine, you used to think that inference compute is the limiting factor to robotaxis. Do you still think that is the case after Elon's comments on stage and our discussions here?
Yes. I saw his comments on stage.
Wow.
They didn't really negate that.
Well, he said that the dynamic close to reaching limits of hardware space.
What did he say? I couldn't understand you.
I believe he says something. I mean, this is not verbatim correct, but he said something like they're not even close to reaching the limits of hardware 3.
Okay, well, I missed that part. So I thought I heard the part from Michael's question, but there must have been another part I missed. So if that's the case, that would change things. If he said they're not even close to the limits of hardware 3, then I would have to step back and say, okay, that's totally possible. I thought the calibration for hardware 3 was there was all these rumors when they were running V11, which of course with C code you could argue takes up more compute or more CPU, that they were at max and they were trying to use both nodes. And I don't think that was fully verified, but that was just using it as a calibration point for a while. They're using a bunch of the compute already. If he's now saying they're barely using the compute on hardware 3, that seems like that's a big change in the thought of how much of hardware 3 compute is being used. So,
okay. So it sounds like this is a material comment. So I want to get the wording correct. If somebody could please go back to the video on stage when Elon's talking about hardware 3, hardware 4. I believe he said something along the lines of they're not even close to getting to limits of hardware 3. But we need the actual wording. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, this conversation is exciting to me because this is exactly why I asked the question that I asked at the shareholder meeting. So I wish we could get like Ashok to answer the question basically, because he might have given us more detail.
Michael, that was a great question.
It was
you
a
have
good
any
question,
thoughts?
but I don't think he wanted to answer it.
Right.
Which might suggest
There you
that
go.
the answer is not good.
Omar got the exact wording here at the top of our screens. We still have a long way to reach the limits of hardware 3. So I was basically remembering correctly. So Machine, is this time for you to admit once again that you are wrong?
Not yet, because Musk he always leaves a little gap in how he says things for exactly what the truth is. So, for instance, he didn't say hardware 3 will be sufficient for a certain level of reliability. He just said we have a quote long way to go. What's a long way to go? How do you quantify that? People could laugh and say it doesn't matter, but this is like, it's like his other statements where he's like, well, once the known bugs are fixed, we'll have this level of miles per intervention. What known bugs? This is neural nets. Like, how many are known bugs? So these sort of statements don't necessarily give me super confidence in what he means. It could just mean, for instance, that if we compute this, train the model longer, the same number of parameters, train it longer with more data, and as Malik said, better data, that we're going to get a better model for what works on hardware 3. And that could still be a long way to go. So it's slightly positive for sure, but I can't give it a lot of weighting.
I mean, I think what he's saying is pretty simple. The people who have been saying for years that hardware 3 has reached its limits, it's over capacity, they've been wrong. Everything we're seeing so far is only hardware 3. And Machine, I am begging you, please go buy hardware 3 and put it in your car and start using the hands-free FSD and go see what the hardware 3 on your car is capable of. You will be blown away when you start using it on a daily basis hands-free.
This guy, in his grave, we're going to write that he really wanted me to have hardware 3.
I mean, how broke are you? What options trades are you doing that you're so broke that you can't upgrade to hardware 3? It's $1,000. It's cheap.
I don't care. I'm not going to spend. I don't drive that much. Okay, drop my kids off. I'm not going to sit there and wait for this grandma slow version of hardware 3 to drive me around. No, man.
It's not a grandma. It's pretty assertive now.
I've been in the car.
I mean, look, if you're going to come on the space and just crap on hardware 3 and say it's so terrible, you'd be a lot more informed if you could say, well, I have it on my car and it failed to do this.
Machine, we actually have Alex in listening mode right now. And Alex had a message for you yesterday. And me, I guess, because I side with you on this. And Alex said, what do you think about a virgin opining on sex? Same goes about FSD and people who have not tried it. What do you say to Alex?
Well, it's all relative, right? So he's Brazilian. So they basically have sex with everyone in the country. So yeah, I guess like I haven't had sex with 180 million people. So I guess you can say more about that.
So are you going to get hardware 3 so you can opine on sex? I mean, FSD?
No, listen, it's I'm just so distracted now thinking about analogies with hardware 3 and sex, which is admittedly a hard analogies to make.
Well, I
But
actually replied to him and said, just because you got laid a few times doesn't make you a licensed sex therapist.
well, I just think for some people like Omar, they can have sex every day and it's not really changing things for the hardware 3. It's not really climaxing or really testing the boundaries. But with me, you go in hardware 3 one time in a month and it's never going to forget. It stays in hardware 3's memory forever.
All right. Let's see. Luce.
Hello, everybody. So I wanted to say that if you tried to drive a Tesla with the hardware 3 cameras, 30 FPS at 50 miles per hour, you will crash. Okay, that's how bad.
Is that
how
Machine? Do you agree with that? If you try, hold on.
better cameras.
Do you agree with that, Machine? That if you try to drive with 38 FPS at 50 miles an hour, you will crash.
No, I disagree. That's coming
No, bro.
from
Possible.
someone. No parlo Italiano. That's coming from the viewpoint of people who look at things from a simple like frame by frame analysis, and they're not actually doing proper signal processing and filtering on a signal. Obviously, the car can drive. I mean, first of all, common sense, big picture here. There's many people like Omar who've had sex with hardware 3 every day, and they could see how well it's performing at a slow 50-mile-an-hour grandma speed on the highway, and it hasn't crashed for many people. So number one, that's just big picture. But number two, really, it's about signal processing. Is that you don't have to snap 2 or 3 shots of pictures per second to evaluate speed. That's not how that works from signal processing and filtering. You do need to have a certain frame rate in aggregate to estimate velocity of objects and deacceleration, right? So for static objects, you need that. And so for certainly higher frames per second will allow you to smooth your signal more aggressively and get more instantaneous responses for detecting objects and changing speeds. But so there is a law there, but there's nothing to say that 30 frames per second, for instance, is impossible to use to detect objects on the highway. You may also change your aggressiveness of driving, right, based on that.
I mean, autopilot can drive 90 miles an hour with just vision. You're arguing that it's not possible, but there's a million people doing it every day.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous argument. Okay, Lucia, we're going to move on. Sorry. Alex, welcome. What are your updated thoughts on having sex and, FSD?
Well, I think my analogy stands, regardless of Machine and his, bias against Brazilians and stuff. You got to have try. I had the same bias, like, to be honest. You remember I was in Spaces, I was like opining, well, I don't think that, and then I tried it and I changed my opinion. So yeah, you got to try it.
I've tried Brazilian.
Oh, okay. You've had Brazilian?
All right. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Are you talking about Brazilian wax? Okay, hold on. Where is this conversation going? Oh, let's bring this back to Earth. So Alex is convinced that, in order to opine on FSD, you have to try FSD. Omar says, if you're going to talk about hardware 3 so much, you should at least have hardware 3 on your car machine. Since, you're making, I think you said you and your wife are making together an absurd amount of money, so you can afford $1,000 of upgrade. But I mean, I actually side with Machine on this, that the data speaks for itself. And Omar explained to us earlier Elon's comments around not necessarily needing 10x compute for the Marshall lines for each line. And we are looking for more detail on that, more detail if possible, if that's the information. Michael, Machine, and Alex.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the hardware 3 bit that 12.4, 12.5, 12.6, or as Elon says, you should conceptualize it. You should think of it as version 4, 5, and 6, because there's each one has a step change in improvement, at least 2x, he said, up to 5 to 10x in each one. And 12.4, 12.5, and 12.6 are all trained for hardware 3. They haven't trained any versions for hardware 4 yet, because that's what the South expansion in Giga Texas is for. So, I mean, for $1,000, if you can get all these dots on your plot in terms of how it's progressing across these different versions, I mean, that's invaluable investment research. So for $1,000, I think that's pretty cheap.
Machine, then
Yeah, just Alex is upset because I always I make bad jokes about Brazilians, and that's just because I lived there for a while, so I just like to make jokes about it. And he's just, eu acho que Alex tem vergonha de ser brasileiro. Okay, he knows what that means. And as I'm doing my airing of grievances, I would just say to Alexander, who's talking about sandwiches with Optimus, those Swedes should talk about their sandwiches. Their knäckebröd, this hard bread. They just eat hard bread with cucumber. That's it. That's all they eat all day.
Alex.
Yeah, so no, I am not ashamed of being Brazilian. You can see it on my profile pic. There's a little flag there. So I'm very proud of being Brazilian. And like for the sex part, yeah, you got to try it. It's like no amount of data. Like, can you imagine somebody like watching a lot of Pornhub and then telling you he knows everything about sex and how good it is and what he likes and doesn't like about sex? Would you take that person seriously? I don't think so. So just try it. It's like, it's not, and even if you have to pay for it, like, just do it.
Omar.
Yeah, Machine's essentially coming here and saying, you can't finish from a BJ. And we're saying, well, maybe you've never had a good BJ. And hey, let's go over here. Why don't you just buy one? And maybe you'll see that it can actually be good.
There
And he's
goes the
saying, no.
monetization. So please remember Patreon.
No, actually, those are within the rules, I think. So you can't talk about all that. Just no cursing.
I thought very carefully about how to phrase it.
Thank you. I noticed that. I noticed you almost like pulled up the rules, I think. Machine.
Yeah, but the analogy with the BJ is that if your compute isn't big enough, then it might damage something, and so you have to be careful.
Machine, somebody warned me in the replies. Uzi warned me in the replies that you got me demonetized in Portuguese. Is that correct?
No, it's not true.
Okay, thank you. Alexander.
Yeah, I just want to add that knäckebröd is a respectable cuisine.
Thank you. Luce, and then Laura. Luce, you're on mute.
So I wanted to say that, first of all, 30 FPS are not stable. I don't think they are stable. And that's extremely important, okay? Because if it lags, it takes 0.2 seconds of lag, and your reliability basically is not enough. 30 FPS, come on, let's be honest. So, and then just one more thing. Might be true that it's possible to have FSD complete with 30 FPS. It's possible and probably is, but why make it more difficult for yourself? It's hardware 3, it's old, and with new hardware, we will see incredible results because it's way, way simpler. That's all.
Lauren. that machine than Omar.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little personal anecdote that really brought home for me what how hard it is to just rely on the data for FSD. My notifications blew up a little bit for me because I have a small Twitter account following, but I was named as one of the top 3 contributors last week on the EV Canada Miles deal. He sent out a weekly email, and it really brought into relief like how little data we have on that. I mean, I only track my miles on a long commute I have, which 11.3.6 is working dynamite. I mean, I love it. It's almost works completely, but it's, relatively easy roads, very easy roads in the grand scheme of what's out there. And I think I was like probably over 10 to 15% of the total miles tracked for the whole week was just my few drives, like from my house to my boat back and forth. And it really brought into focus for me how limited that data really is. I mean, I definitely support the effort, and I try and log it when I can, and I hope everyone else does. But I don't think it's. I agree with Omar that you get a lot better sense trying it yourself than looking at that data.
Okay, before we go to machine, just a quick reminder that this space is financed by my patrons. Without my patrons, this space is not possible. If you'd like to join my Patreon, the link is at the top of your screens. Thank you very much. And patrons now get daily summaries, written summaries of about 5 to 10 bullet points of what we discussed here, as well as a couple of other updates that I see on X that I believe are important. Machine.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Luce. I don't fundamentally disagree with the idea that frame rate is a very important sensitivity factor for estimating objects, at fast moving speeds. So you could be right that for the most difficult cases where there's like a sudden stoppage of a vehicle, that frame rate is not going to be able to quickly pick up the slowing down of the object fast enough. Like that's possible. Like I don't have the data in front of me to look at it. There are going to be some cases where that may be possible, and that you do need a higher frame rate, like 100 frames per second or something like that. So I think fundamentally could be some cases around the edges where that may be an issue.
Omar, then Alex.
Yeah, I mean, the human eye really only does 30 to 60 frames per second max. Then when you factor in response times, it's even less than that. So I think it's kind of a moot point. There's no doubt that the cameras can operate at whatever frame rate they need to. But it's really the limit of perception. And when you're driving, you tend to space yourself out appropriately that you have enough reaction time to react to things. So, we tend to design driving scenarios, for example, so that you have ideally good road visibility into any object. You're not going to have to respond in, a 60th of a second, right? When we talk about 60 frames per second, we mean an image is being taken in every 1/60th of a second. So, can you think of any time when you had to react to a driving maneuver in less than a 60th of a second or a 30th of a second? No, usually you have at least a few seconds to respond. So I think this is kind of just a silly line of discussion.
Alex.
Yeah, he said basically what I was going to say, that we don't need to react in like 10 milliseconds. 10 milliseconds, we can't even perceive anything happening that fast. So there's no point.
Machine.
I think in general that's correct, but there are issues just with extreme cases where an object like a car just suddenly stops in front of you, going from 80 miles an hour down to 0. And of course, that car probably crashed.
Wow, this car has incredible
Well-
braking time. In a 60th of a second, it stopped? Who makes those brakes?
That's why I said it crashed. It probably crashed for it to suddenly slow down like that. but I'm just saying in those extreme cases that there will be a lag in the vision processing to detect the slowdown at
Look,
more
this
than a
thing is
human.
already seeing things faster than we see them on hardware 3. You would realize that if you had it on your car. You go, oh, what's it doing? Oh, there's a person running into the street. Oh, the light turned yellow. Oh, there's a person who jumped in front of me. It reacts before you notice today. We're not even talking about hardware 4 or hardware 5.
Well, I agree because I think Luce is talking from a pure signal perspective, but the part that he's not including there is reaction time.
Exactly.
And for humans,
Exactly.
you have that part. So yeah, that's why I'm talking in the middle there. I think mostly it'll be fine.
Yeah,
And
I mean the system overall has to be safer than humans. It's not like every single component of the system has to be better than what the humans can do. So,
yeah, the other aspect that people don't also think about is it's looking in every direction at the same time. The human's looking forward, you got 2 eyes. It's got 8 cameras around the car. So if it's processing at 30 frames per second, that's actually, 240 frames per second from all the cameras. So there's quite a bit of inference power in there, and you could focus that more on the front cameras if you needed to or something maybe. But I think you've just got an existence proof in that it's out there and it's able to drive at very high speeds without requiring intervention. Like I was just driving from across the state, and I was driving at like 87 miles an hour, and I just sat there completely hands free, and it just drove me for hours and hours across the state. It's pretty incredible.
yeah,
Yeah, I just had a question regarding the current frame rate processing. I heard you guys throw around 30 per second a lot. But is that accurate? It is 30, the FPS per second?
I mean, I would think it's probably a little bit less than that when you look at the rate of inference processing. I think the cameras maybe support up to like, I'm not sure what frame rate they support, but let me look it up. I think Elon mentioned this in a tweet recently in terms of the inference performance, which is really what matters.
all right. In the meantime, Charlie, go ahead. Charlie, you have to unmute yourself for us to hear you. All right, Daniel, you may unmute yourself and go ahead.
Oh, hey guys. Yeah, so, I beg to argue that, my visual acuity, when in a panic situation is probably around the rate of 64 frames per second. So in a quarter of a second, you could perceive about, I don't know, 4 frames. I'm just guessing, but enough to make a split second decision to save your life. So, that's in roughly 64 frames per second. So,
Okay, thanks, Daniel.
see you later.
All right, so I did find a tweet by Musk from 2022 where he said, increasingly likely that Tesla vehicle computer will be able to process 288 FPS, 36 hertz times 8 cameras. So we're looking at about 36 FPS per camera, and I think he's really talking about inference throughput there. So really some pretty impressive numbers. I don't think anyone can argue that that's insufficient to drive a car.
Alex.
Yeah, just to give some context, because I researched this just to see what we were talking about. So like the fastest like reaction time, the average is like 250 milliseconds. And like fighter pilots and Formula One drivers, championship video game players can go down to as low as 100 to 120 milliseconds. What the previous speaker was talking about, he was talking about that he thought he had a reaction time of 15 milliseconds, which basically is 10 times lower than the highest scoring people. So it's just to give what we're talking about, like a base of reference here.
Thank you. And in the replies, Forstall quote tweeted Green, the only tweet from 2021, says Tesla runs the cameras at 36 frames per hour. I mean, per second. All right.
Yeah, so that means
Oh my,
per camera, they're taking in a frame every 0.02 seconds.
all right, great. Omar, why do you think Tesla is calling hardware 5 AI 5?
Well, the hardware name doesn't really make any sense if you think about it. Like, they put a lot of hardware on their car. I mean, the whole car is hardware, right? The motors are hardware, the battery's hardware, the screen is hardware. So it's a little bit confusing, right? Okay, well, I have the hardware 5 or the hardware 4. Really, it's AI inference hardware. That's what we're talking about here. Because there's other hardware on the car. There's, for example, an MCU, which is running on an Intel Ryzen or a Intel Atom chipset, right? So that's a completely separate thing that doesn't have anything to do with hardware 3 or hardware 4. That's really the AI hardware that runs FSD. So I think it makes sense to come up with a name like AI 5 or AI 4 where the important thing isn't actually that it's hardware. The important thing is that it's the AI inference hardware. It's for the AI systems on the car. So this helps people, I think, understand what it actually is. And I like the name. It is a little more buzzwordy. Maybe that helps people understand really what this inference computer is doing because it is a pretty incredible inference computer. Really great performance per watt, and sounds like they've got some pretty big goals for their AI 5 generation. So um, yeah, not really sure what prompted the rebrand, but it does kind of make sense. The old hardware name didn't really seem to make a lot of sense intuitively.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts from the speaker board or from the audience? Please request to speak. 5-minute warning, 5-minute warning. After which I'm going to go to Patreon and start typing up the summary for the day. Patrons get 5 to 10 bullet point summary of what we discussed in the space, as well as an update on macroeconomic data that's released in the morning of that day. This is a daily update. And now weekly, patrons get a Tesla weekly and a macro weekly over the weekends. Wes Hicks, go ahead.
Hey, Yaman, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the importance of full self-driving 3, hardware 3 working. When Tesla goes into these cities, it's going to be critical to have a high customer acquisition rate. Imagine a scenario where we launch in whatever city it is, and customers go to a Tesla app, they download it, and there's no cars available. They're only going to try that 2 or 3 times, and they're going to abandon they're not going to continue to search for Teslas. So hardware 3 is on so many cars now that if we're unable to use those cars, then in a sense, we're limited to what Tesla can produce, this new robotaxi vehicle, the Cybercab, and the hardware 4 vehicles that are out there, which is going to be incredibly a small pool of vehicles, if you will. So hardware 3 really needs to work for us to be able to launch in these cities and generate revenue at a pretty good clip.
I completely disagree.
Tell us more.
Well, first off, I think hardware 3 is actually going to be able to become a robotaxi. Like I said, all of the FSD we've seen so far has only been hardware 3. So people just have refused to believe this for years and years, in spite of hardware 3 just starting to drive better and better. Well, when is it going to stop exactly? So right now, I don't take it as 100% certainty, but right now my base assumption is that hardware 3 is going to become a robotaxi. But if it can't be for some reason and it can't be retrofitted, remember, these cars are designed with cameras that pop off. The computer comes out, you can put a new computer in there. Everything's designed to be upgradable. But let's say it can't be upgraded and it can't be retrofitted. It still doesn't matter. You know how many driverless cars Waymo has out there, according to their recall notice? 650. Okay. If Tesla said we need a new hardware 7 and we're putting it in the cars today, in 1 week, they would have more cars out than every other self-driving car company in the world in 1 week. So, if we can achieve self-driving and it only works on the latest hardware, I'll take it. I'll take that. That's a great outcome. And then you can, of course, continue to make the older hardware better. Maybe you can offer an upgrade or something. But even if they can only get the latest generation with their production rate, they'll eclipse Waymo and everybody else within the first week, literally. And, let's say they can only do hardware 5 and hardware 4. There's millions of hardware 4 cars out there now. And there's going to be a million more produced by the end of the year and in customers' hands. So it's not really important to make hardware 3 work. Like, they're really doing a lot to make hardware 3 driverless, and I think it is actually capable of being driverless. But if they fail, it ultimately doesn't matter. They just need to get a solution, whether it requires hardware changes or software changes, just solve it, right? And if
Yeah,
hardware 3 can do it, that's just a bonus. That just makes it much bigger.
yeah, exactly. All right, I see that we're kind of running out of time every single day here, and I think part of it is because people are rolling in as the space goes on, and so I highly recommend people to set the reminders when I tweet these out in the morning. Set your reminder, try to get here as early as possible so that you can contribute, ask your questions, get them in before we run out of time. So we're going to continue tomorrow. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'll chat with you tomorrow. Take care.